Today I want to talk to you about community. I want to talk to you about community because, well, I want to share that my definition of community was a little narrow, even as of just recently, just a little narrow, and I had this ideal of what community was, and what that was it was basically a bunch of people all living in one house, sharing meals together, going out and buying things together, sharing everything together, of course having dinner together, and then of course in the evening breaking out in spontaneous worship and prayer. Of course that would naturally happen, right? And we would all get along, and then from there transform the community around us. That was my ideal of what community looked like. So I'm 30 now, so in my 20s, I really tried to make this happen. I really tried to discover, to find this dynamic community, this ideal community. And I've lived in various places in Canada, have had many roommates. At one point, I even had 6 roommates. 3 of them were named Rebecca, 3 of them were named Sarah, and there was one Tanya, and there was one bathroom as well. Very memorable experience. #intern life. That was a memorable experience, but even that was not meeting up to my ideal of what I thought community looked like. So I thought, okay, 2.5 years ago, I was making my way to Ottawa. I was going to move to Ottawa from my hometown of Moncton, New Brunswick. And I thought, okay, when I move to Ottawa, this is where I'll find this ideal community. This is where I'll pursue this ideal community. So I leave Moncton, New Brunswick, where my family is. I only know one other person here in Ottawa. I moved to a basement apartment with my cat. And for the first 1.5 years, I really tried to make this happen. I looked for roommates, and opportunities came up. I even found a situation similar to what I'm describing, this community, but for some reason I just didn't feel right moving forward in it, or the doors closed, whatever. So I reigned on my own in this basement apartment by myself, and suddenly I had to redefine what community looked like. God started to broaden my definition of what community looks like. Because how many of you know that situation, that does happen, but it's difficult, and it depends on what stage in life you're at. It doesn't always happen like that. So I had to start being more intentional about community. Maybe it took a little bit more work than what I thought, but and it started to look a little bit different, but I started to kind of broaden my definition. And living in a basement apartment, there were still opportunities for loneliness, of course, but I discovered that, and I had mentioned, so I lived in various places in Canada, and I've seen that no matter who I speak to, no matter what stage in life a person is at, whether they are surrounded by family, whether they're married, whether they have kids, whether they have 10 roommates and are surrounded by friends, it doesn't seem to matter that people all seem to be acquainted with this feeling of loneliness. Everybody knows it. Everybody has felt lonely at one point or another, whether you're surrounded by people or whether you're living in a basement apartment all by yourself. Everyone has felt lonely at some point. It doesn't matter, maybe some are more acquainted with the feeling than others. And I started to notice that loneliness seems to be a bit of a national discussion. I noticed that there were articles that were posted that loneliness actually affects our physical health. How many of you know that loneliness, people that are lonely happen to get sick more often? They're more prone to heart disease. They're more prone to cancer. And this is not just people living on their own. This is also people who may be surrounded by people but feel lonely. They are more prone to sickness. And I also, notice this national discussion, and maybe you have noticed this ironically on social media, that we are so super socially connected by our technology, but yet we seem to be so isolated. So I noticed that, loneliness seems to be a bit of a topic of interest for people, and that's striking a chord with people. And I also know that we were made for genuine relationship. And I know that because, in Genesis 1 and 2, it talks about God creating everything, everything that we see here in the universe. And every time he creates something, he sees it's good. He creates something, it's good. It's good. The only time in creation that it's not good is when he creates Adam and he's all by himself. He doesn't have Eve yet. Suddenly it is not good that man is alone. And then he creates Eve, and then it is very good, right? The end of creation, God says, this is very good. So just imagine Adam in this perfect paradise. He's surrounded by this perfect garden. He's in perfect communication with God. He's got this unhindered relationship with God. He's got lots of animal friends around him, maybe a couple of cats, right? But still, it's not good. It's not good. good because he's alone. And he was made for community. He was made for relationship. He was made to embrace relationship. He was made to embrace community. And so today I want to talk to you about just that, embracing community. And my subtitle is, It's Right in Front of You. So in defining community, of course, we can define community as a group of people all living within one location. So that's a definition of community. Another definition would be a group of people that have the same values. But what I'm saying when I say community, it's kind of a pop culture reference of real relationship. That's what I'm talking. When I say community, I mean real, genuine relationship. You know, the kind of relationships that are there when things get difficult, right? The kind of relationships that you make moments into memories. The kind of relationships that challenge you. The kind of relationships that teach you how to love. That is the community that I'm referring to. And the Bible also has some really great definitions of community. And in Hebrews 10, 24, 25, it says this. It says, "And let us consider how we may spur each other on towards love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching." So, you know, in Hebrews, in chapter 10, the author is talking about the essentials of faith. So he's talking, these are the essentials of faith and community, meeting together, not giving up, meeting together. That's an essential of faith. And you can see by the language he uses, let's find ways to spur each other on towards love and good deeds. Let's not give up meeting together. Let's encourage one another. These are all action words, right? These are all verbs. So it doesn't seem like meeting together in community seems to be a passive thing. It seems to be something that we initiate, that we go out and we do. It takes work, right? So he's using these action words, but you know, sometimes community can be right in front of us and we don't even realize it. So going back to loneliness, so there's an article in the Washington Post about loneliness, and I thought this was interesting, the way that they define loneliness. It says the most broadly accepted definition of loneliness is the distress people feel when reality fails to meet their ideal of social relationships. Their ideal of social relationships. So maybe relationships are right in front of you, but it just doesn't quite look the way that you thought it would, and suddenly you feel lonely. So maybe you feel like you're surrounded by lots of friends, but when the rubber meets the road, nobody's actually there when things get difficult. Maybe that's you. Or maybe you feel like you just find yourself alone a lot. Maybe you're alone on the weekends a lot. Or maybe you feel like you're the only one in this stage of life that you're at. You know, maybe you're the only married couple in your group of friends. Or maybe you're the only couple that has young kids in your group of friends. Or maybe you're the only couple that doesn't have kids in your group of friends. But you just feel like nobody really is at the same stage in life, and you feel lonely in that sense. Or maybe you're surrounded by great community, you're well connected, you have great friends, you don't need anything, you're good. Or maybe you don't want community at all, and you are perfectly fine all by yourself in your pajamas and your Netflix, and you're good. You don't want community at all. So no matter where you are on this scale of wanting community, we can all learn to get better at embracing relationship. We can all get better at seeing the community that's right in front of us and initiating new relationships and finding new friends. So today, I want to talk about 3 ways that we can embrace community even when it doesn't look the way that maybe we thought it would. So embrace number 1 would be embracing differences. Embracing differences. So we actually tend to, it's been shown, research has shown that we tend to gravitate towards people that are similar than us. We tend to gravitate towards people because when we see that they're similar than us, there's familiarity and there's trust, right? So maybe we gravitate towards people who look like us, or maybe we gravitate towards people who have a certain personality or the same stage of life than us. It's been shown that when we meet somebody and we see a couple of common traits, we just automatically assume that person is just like us. And so that's where trust is built, right? But it's important to surround ourselves with people that are different than us, right? Going back to our verse in Hebrews 10, 24, 25, it says, "And let us consider how we may spur each other on towards love and good deeds." It's so much easier to spur each other on when you are surrounding yourself with people that have done things that you never thought could be done before, or they do things in a different way, accomplish things in a different way. It says in Proverbs 27, 1:17, as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. And God started to speak to me about this, surrounding myself with people that are different by using a parable in my life. So Pastor Sean mentioned a few weeks ago in one of his messages that God speaks a lot in parables, right? The Gospels, Jesus spoke in parables. And so if we're paying attention, if we're looking for it, God will speak to us through parables. It's awesome because you get to hear God in a different way, in a dynamic way. So God started to speak to me through my running. I started to run about 5 years ago. And so I started about 5 years ago running an average of about 3 kilometers in the morning. I'd get up early in the morning, run 3 kilometers, and I thought, I'm awesome, I'm an awesome runner, and I am reaching my full potential. Now, I knew that there are other people out there that were running greater distance than me, but I just thought those are that's for the Olympics. Like 3 kilometers, my max, yeah, I've got this, I'm the best runner. And then I found out one of my friends was running an average of 5 kilometers, and I thought, okay, I'm a little competitive. So I found out, and I'm like, okay, if she's running 5 kilometers, I can run 5 kilometers. So I started to push myself, and by the end of the summer, that became my benchmark. I ran an average of 5 kilometers. And then I had a couple of business contacts invite me out for a run. So originally, for some reason, when I agreed, it was only 2 kilometers. So I was like, yeah, sure, I can do 2 kilometers. I show up, turns out we're actually running 8 kilometers. And it's not just a few of us that are running, we're joining a whole host of intense runners. Like the intense runners that have the fanny pack of waters, those ones, and the pace watch and the running room gear. Like these guys are intense runners. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, what have I gotten myself into? So we start running, and they are pacing way ahead of me. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness. So one of the guys, he's like this, father business coach type. So he's like staying behind with me. He's like, yeah, you got this, Tanya. You can do this. You can do this. Don't worry. There's going to be other people that pace behind. No, we were the last ones. They went way ahead of us. We lost track of them. And, he's going on about how he's run these half marathons. And the entire time I'm thinking, I'm going to puke. I'm going to faint, maybe both. I am not a runner. What am I doing? This is not, my body is just not designed to run. This is not natural. I am not going to, after this run, I think I'm never going to run again. And so I'm thinking this as he's going on about how he's trained. And then at the end, so it turns out we actually ran 9 kilometers. And at the end, it was actually exhilarating. I didn't know that I could run that far. And so through that, God started to speak to me about surrounding myself with people that will challenge my status quo, challenge these benchmarks, these limitations that I set for myself. I would have never known that I could run that. And actually, it turns out I moved to Ottawa, and I ran my first half marathon. So, I went from 3 to half to 21 kilometers. I would have never known unless I surrounded myself with people that showed me that it is possible to accomplish this. It is possible. So it's important to surround ourselves with people that are at different stages in life than us, that are maybe, like I mentioned, maybe you're single and you're hanging out with people that are married. This is good because then you can learn what healthy marriage looks like. Or maybe you're a single person and you hang out with a family. That's good because then you can find out what healthy family dynamics look like. Or maybe you decide that you don't want to have a family after hanging out with that family. Or maybe you have, an older couple hanging out with a younger couple. You can learn from each other, and maybe the older couple can be reminded of the passion of young love and what it once was. So, it's important to surround ourselves with people that are at different stages in life. And sometimes, it's uncomfortable and it's a little bit different. You're having a hard time to find commonalities, but it's good. And it's good to surround ourselves with people that have different personalities than us as well. I know some of my best friends, when I first met them, I thought, we have nothing in common. We're not going to be friends. And then they end up being some of my best friends. And, actually, some of the most successful organizations are successful because of a dynamic duo, a partnership of 2 complete opposites. So you've got Walt Disney. So Walt and his brother Roy. So Walt is the guy with the vision. He was the one who, had the vision for Mickey Mouse. And Roy was the guy who knew how to make it happen. He was the guy who made sure there was money in the bank when the checks came, right? And Walt recognized, he said, the organization wouldn't have become what it became if it wasn't for his brother Roy. It was important, that dynamic duo, and there's so many more organizations, Apple for another example, this dynamic duo of visionary and then the guy who knows how to make it happen. It was important of that partnership. So in this building, it's important, this differences, they complement each other. It's important to surround ourselves with people that are different, that challenge us, that help us build, that help us see things in a different way. And of course, it's easier to stay in the status quo, right? It's easier to just stay on your own in doing the same thing, but it's important to embrace differences. And not only that, but it's important to embrace the difficulties, the discomfort. Embrace discomfort. And that's my second point. Embrace discomfort. And going back to our verse in Hebrews 10:25, it says, not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing. It's so much easier to get into the habit of just spending the evening alone than Netflix, right? It's so much easier just to hang out in your PJs, turn on the Netflix, rather than go out and meet that new person that you just started, talking to. Maybe call up a friend to go out for coffee. That takes more energy, right? But, sometimes when we find ourselves kind of alone a lot, we suddenly start to blame other people because of our loneliness. We start to point the finger. In Proverbs 18:1, it says, whoever isolates himself seeks his own desire. He breaks out against all sound judgment. You spend one weekend alone and you've convinced yourself you have no friends and nobody wants to hang out with you. Going back to this Washington Post article about loneliness, it talks about how lonely people actually tend to be more negative towards other people. And then that in turn makes it more difficult for them to build relationship. It's this cycle. And sure, there are people like that, but it's also so easy to get into that mindset, right? Of hanging out by yourself and then blaming other people, judging other people. They don't want to hang out with me. I'm cool. Why don't they want to hang out with me? Pointing the finger, and then the next time you see them, you have all these judgments against them. And it's difficult to build relationship when you get into that mindset. So it's important to break out of that cycle, right? And breaking out of that cycle, of course, you have to embrace discomfort. And sometimes you may feel, like I said, maybe you have a group of friends around you and you're completely comfortable and, you don't feel like you need any other friends. But, life changes. Maybe you'll move next month, or maybe you'll go to a new workplace. It's important to know how to build new relationships, right? And so, you might think to yourself, that's just not my personality. I'm not extroverted. I'm not comfortable meeting new people. But I would have said a few years ago that that's not my personality type either. I'm not one that, I wasn't comfortable being in a setting, meeting new people, trying to build conversation. That was an uncomfortable scenario for me. But I decided I wanted to learn and I wanted to build that skill. So I remember seeing one of the girls in one of my churches, and she just people would naturally gravitate towards her. She would, make people feel comfortable in her presence, and just people would naturally, she's just so good at relationship. And I thought, I want to get better at relationship. I want to get better at, having people comfortable in my presence and building new relationships. So I thought, this is not only a good skill just to learn how to build relationship, how to build love, but it's also good it helped in my job as well with networking. So I decided to practice the skill, and I started to hone in on these principles from originally, I guess, from Dale Carnegie in his book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. I'm sure some of you have heard. It's a classic book, great read, but he's got a few principles throughout the book, and two that I particularly took that really changed the dynamics of how I approach relationship, and I just want to share that with you. So the first one being, be a good listener. Ask the questions that other people want to answer. They want to answer these questions and encourage people to talk about themselves. So when I first heard this principle, I thought, okay, this is going to be difficult because I really love talking. So I thought, okay, I'm going to have to step back, be the question asker, become a good listener. And I found that when I sat back and started to ask the questions, I actually started to really fall in love with people. I really discovered that people are are this deep well of wisdom. They have been through situations that I can learn from, knowledge that I can glean from. Everybody has a story, and it's worth hearing. And so when I would take the time to listen to these people, I would start to see value. And I would really just want to, take a moment and listen to them, see their value. And that was the second principle. Learn how to see somebody's value and show people, make people feel important, and make sure that you do it sincerely. Of course, insincerity is you can read it from a mile away. If you're trying to make somebody feel important but you don't actually believe it, people can sense that. But when you actually see somebody's value, you can make them feel important, and that is actually being in the hospitality industry. And even my role here at the church, it's my favorite thing. My favorite part of my job is listening, pay attention to detail, and really making people feel important, showing people that they are valuable, finding special ways to see that they are recognized. That's what I love doing now, and showing people that they are truly important. So, okay, this seems like a bit of a backwards concept, right? So I'm talking about loneliness, and if you feel lonely, and then I'm talking about ways to help engage with people and meet with people. So what I'm saying is that if you feel lonely, go out and make friends. Embrace discomfort. That's, go out, and it seems a little backwards, but if you want to be loved, you first love. If you want to receive, you give first. Go out, embrace the discomfort, and yes, okay, sometimes, it is uncomfortable, and sometimes you do face a bit of rejection. Maybe you'll feel, and maybe even you currently feel like you're always the person that asks the person out for coffee. You're always that person. You're always like asking people out for coffee, or you're always the one that's trying to organize, the get-together to the movies. You're always the one that's inviting people over to your house. But that's okay. That's okay, right? It's okay to be the one that's known for trying to build community. It's okay to build that. Sometimes you will feel a little bit rejection. It's okay. Sometimes people don't want to hang out. Some people will not want to go for coffee. Sometimes you have to hound people a little bit. And okay, this happens to everyone. You plan a get-together and nobody shows up. Don't stop organizing events. Just keep on doing it. It happens to everyone. It happens to everyone, okay? Let's just get that out in the open. It doesn't mean that nobody likes you. We're all busy. Just keep on planning those events. People will show up eventually. It'll be happening. So just do it. Just embrace that discomfort. And you know what? If you do tend to, get a little hurt, feel a little uncomfortable, get a little offended, it's okay. It's just an opportunity to embrace forgiveness. And that's the third point. So embrace forgiveness. That's important to relationship. Going back to our verse in Hebrews 10:24-25, let's go through the whole verse and saying, and let us consider how we may spur each other on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. All the more as you see the day approaching. Jesus, so what does that mean? What does the day approaching mean? What does that mean? Well, Jesus, when he resurrected from the dead, he said, don't worry, guys, I'll be back. Don't worry. So the early church, their mentality was Jesus could come back at any moment now. Any minute, he could come back. And that's still the mentality that we can have today. 2,000 years later, that's still the mentality that we can have, that Jesus is going to come back at any moment. But not only that, but life is short, right? Sounds like a little bit of a downer, but life is fragile. We could not be here tomorrow, or the person that we love could not be here tomorrow. So it's important to embrace every opportunity to just let go, to just forgive, right? Even if you are surrounded by perfect relationships, even if you are surrounded by perfect community, eventually, if you stick around long enough, you're going to get a little offended, right? Those true colors are going to start coming out, and you're going to be offended sometimes. You're going to be hurt. You're going to disagree with somebody. It's going to happen, right? We're all imperfect, but this is why it's so important to, at every opportunity, just embrace forgiveness. Just be quick to forgive. Let it go. Don't pick up offense. It's a choice. Offense is a choice. You don't have to pick it up. You don't have to be offended. Just assume the best. Assume the best. Just assume that person, you know what? They blew you off. They're just having a bad day. It's not personal. Just assume the best and don't pick up offense. It's not worth giving up relationship. It's not worth sacrificing relationships. Just be quick to forgive. But it's so much easier said than done, right? It's so much easier to say, just forgive it, just let it go. But hurt goes deep, right? Hurt goes deep, and sometimes hurt from our past can even really just come up and affect, our present relationship, our future relationships. And so, this is where it's an opportunity to just embrace forgiveness, let go of the hurt. I shared with you back, when I was when I shared in June. I shared that I was married when I was 22, and I was married when I was 22, so I'm 30 now, and that was 8 years ago. When I was married for, it was about 9 months, and I found out that my husband was seeing somebody else. So, really long story short, waiting 2.5 years, and it didn't work out. And so, walking away from that situation, I figured, you know what? This is gonna affect me in my future relationships. This means that I will be. It'll be really hard for me to trust. And so, with this being difficult to trust, I just thought, okay, moving forward in any kind of relationships. And then I remember God confronted me on that issue. And he said, Tanya, if that is really your mentality, if that is really what you believe, of course he confronted me in a very gentle, mild way. But, him just saying to me, listen, if this is your mentality, then you don't believe that I can fully heal you. God has complete healing for us, right? Not only does he want to fully heal us physically, but he wants to fully heal us emotionally as well, right? And so he had this complete healing for us, or for me, but I didn't want to let go of my pain. It's so much easier to excuse our behavior, to make excuses for future relationships, to hold on to that pain. But it takes courage to let go, to fully forgive, to trust God again, to learn how to trust God again, right? And so letting go of the pain is, you don't have to hold on to that scar tissue. That doesn't have to be there. God has complete emotional healing for us. And okay, forgiving somebody doesn't mean that what they did was right. They might not even acknowledge that what they're doing is wrong, but it's okay. Just forgive. It's a gift. Just let it go. Forgiveness is a gift, and just because you're forgiving doesn't mean that what they're doing is right. But it's worth it. It's not worth sacrificing relationship to hold on to pain. And, you might, like I said, you might be completely in the right. You might be completely in the right. But it's important to just embrace that forgiveness. Embrace what the gift that God has. And it's difficult, I know, because I'm a kind of a justice heart person. So when something happens, I'm like, God, there needs to be justice. This is a wrong situation. It needs to be made right? But God hates those situations too, and I think that that's important to recognize. He's not just saying, okay, just let it go, like it's not that big of a deal. No, he hates that as well. He hates the hurt that people caused you. He rages against injustice. He rages against the hurt that people cause you. But Jesus took that all on the cross. Jesus took that offense all on the cross, and he took the rage even that God has against that, so that we can harness the full power of forgiveness.